In this episode of the Huberman Lab podcast, Dr. Elissa Epel, a professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at the University of California, San Francisco, talks about stress. They also explore how stress affects our behavioral choices, particularly our food choices, and how we experience food. Dr. Epel highlights the importance of creating safe environments both at home and in the workplace where sugary drinks are not readily available, and the success that she and her colleagues at UCSF had in removing sugary drinks from hospital cafeterias and campuses. This change led heavy soda drinkers to lose weight in their waistline and improved their overall health. However, for those with compulsive eating and a strong reward-based drive, the removal of sugary drinks was not enough to curb their cravings. These individuals were given extra support through motivational interviewing, which helped them set goals such as avoiding diabetes and being with their grandchildren, and this had positive effects on their weight and health. Dr. Epel also emphasizes the harmful effects of drinking sugar in liquid form and views soda as one of the worst culprits in terms of its impact on the body's regulation of insulin and glucose. While Dr. Huberman acknowledges that he occasionally drinks diet soda, he recognizes the better alternatives of coffee and tea, as well as the harm that sugary drinks can cause. They discuss whether this consumption is a reaction to the stress people experience, or simply because sugary drinks are inexpensive and easy to consume. They note that sugary drinks have not been studied in the same way as comfort food and binge eating, but they do believe that sugary drinks are part of the hedonic cycle. The cycle is that a person feels good when they consume the sugary drink, then they experience a low, so they become compulsive and want to consume more to feel better. Dr. Epel states that sugary drinks are some of the worst things we can do for our health. She states that liquid sugar from sugary drinks goes to the brain quicker than sugary food, making it more addictive, similar to cocaine or crack. Dr. Epel believes that in the years to come, with continued effort from people like Dr. Huberman and Dr. Lustig, who are vocal about the issue, it can become a more mainstream topic of conversation, much like trans fats. The discussion continues to explore the power of social norms and how they influence personal choices. Dr. Epel believes it is much more considerate to bring a bowl of fruit than junk food or soda to work because people tend to eat what is in front of them. Dr. Huberman brings up the example of smoking and how young people were convinced to stop smoking by showing them videos of rich people cackling about making profits from the health problems of smokers, making being a non-smoker anti-establishment. He believes that, in order to change the younger generation's perception of sugary drinks, we need to activate their sense of rebellion and show them that the sugary drink industry is working against them to take control of their health. Dr. Epel states that this has been true for hundreds of years, and it is true for big food markets like sugary drinks. They mention a method called dissonance, which involves showing people with eating disorders how the food industry designs addictive foods with high dopamine levels. The dissonance method has shown to reduce eating disorders and reward drive. Dr. Epel explains that one of the most effective tools for changing behavior is rebellion in the direction of health. She provides an example of how they teach mindful eating to their patients by having them bring in the most junky, processed food they can think of, like a Twinkie, and eat it slowly and mindfully. This helps them recognize that the reward they expected based on advertising and their brain's prediction is not as satisfying as they thought. On the other hand, they also have people savor a piece of good chocolate, whether milk or dark, to teach them to eat slowly and enjoy small amounts of rewarding food. Dr. Epel mentions that she likes 100% dark Venezuelan chocolate because it allows her to taste the real elements of chocolate, but Dr. Huberman prefers some fat in his chocolate for mouthfeel. Dr. Epel shares her findings from a study on stress and pregnancy among overweight and obese women. She explains that managing calories alone does not work because stress causes people to revert to binge eating. Therefore, they implemented mindful eating strategies and stress reduction in their program for pregnant women to prevent excessive weight gain during pregnancy. A study found that while both the control and mindful groups of women gained excess weight during pregnancy, the women who received the mindfulness training had improved insulin sensitivity, which led to less obesity and fewer illnesses in their baby's first year of life. Additionally, 8 years later, the women who went through the mindfulness training still showed improved mental health. The mindfulness intervention involved just 10 minutes a day of meditation, which consisted of a mindful check-in, mindful breathing, and movements such as prenatal yoga or slow walking. The check-in involved closing their eyes, feeling their body, and labeling their emotions. The breathing helped to reduce stress in the uterine environment, while the movement refocused their attention from ruminative thoughts to the sensations in their body. The study also found that a body scan, which involves focusing on each part of the body, significantly reduced cravings in overweight individuals. Dr. Elissa Epel then discusses the concepts of interception and exteroception, and their potential roles in craving and binge eating. Interception refers to the sensory innervation of internal organs and skin, while proprioception refers to our sense of where our limbs are in space. Body scans, which focus on interoception by paying attention to heart rate and other internal sensations, have been shown to reduce cravings. Huberman wonders if craving is actually a form of exteroception, where interoception is locked onto external stimuli such as the sight and smell of a donut. He speculates that body scans may break the interoceptive-exteroceptive tether and reduce cravings. While there are currently few long-term studies of stress interventions, the researchers discuss how meditation studies have found slower biological aging and reduced inflammatory pathways in gene expression. Body scans and other mind-body activities may also be effective in breaking the link between stress and food cravings. Dr. Epel also discusses a study where individuals participated in a retreat for 1 week, and the effects of the retreat on their gene expression and mental health were measured. The participants were not allowed to bring their laptops, worked less, and ate an anti-inflammatory and Ayurvedic diet. One group learned transcendental primordial sound meditation, while the other group just walked around the resort and listened to health talks. Results showed that in the short term, everyone felt fantastic a week later, with the gene expression pathways being drastically different from day 1 to day 7. However, in the long term, 10 months later, not everyone felt great, and the control group bounced back up, while the group that learned meditation still had lower depression. Notably, people with early adversity appeared to benefit the most from the meditation condition. Dr. Epel also discusses how meditation is a skill that takes some time to develop, and people need to have a little training before going on a silent meditation retreat. While long retreats can be beneficial, short daily bouts of meditational practice are the most important message for people to manage daily stress. Daily nudges such as breathing or being in nature are great ways to reduce stress arousal. Furthermore, meditation can enhance plant medicine experiences by providing individuals with some training in metacognition, allowing them to observe experiences with calmness, skill, and wisdom. The podcast touches on the increased focus on psychedelics and how some are starting to forget the vast literature supporting the use of even brief meditation practices for reshaping the mind. Dr. Huberman adds that the actual rewiring of the brain happens after the psychedelic journey, and most of the rewiring occurs in the weeks or months after. Dr. Epel describes a study on mitochondrial health and mood that showed a correlation between low mitochondrial activity in chronically stressed caregivers and their dampened ability to produce energy, resulting in feelings of exhaustion. The study also found that those caregivers who had better mitochondrial enzymes had more positive emotions, especially in the evening. Dr. Epel also emphasizes the importance of daily moods, which are correlated with our mitochondrial health and sensitivity to our thoughts and feelings. Dr. Huberman explores the concept of radical acceptance and its relevance to chronic stress. According to Dr. Epel, radical acceptance can mean accepting the fact that we may not be able to deal with the stressor, but it can also mean accepting the situation for what it is and finding ways to cope with it. In this portion of the podcast, Dr. Elissa Epel and Dr. Andrew Huberman discuss how to handle situations of chronic stress that cannot be changed. Dr. Epel suggests that the first step is to practice radical acceptance of the situation, to understand that bad things can happen and that not everything can be changed. This practice allows individuals to lessen the mental burden of worrying about the situation and frees up emotional space. The practice of radical acceptance involves reminding oneself that there is freedom within the situation, and that it is possible to live well even with unwanted circumstances. Dr. Epel shares a metaphor of pulling on a rope attached to a brick wall to describe the tendency of people to try to solve problems that are unsolvable, which only leads to chronic stress and tension. Instead, she suggests that individuals should focus on what they can do and let go of what cannot be changed. This can involve being present, loving, and caring towards those who are affected by the unwanted situation. The limbic system that triggers fight or flight responses has no sense of time and engages parent-child or caretaker-child neural circuits that were established in those relationships when young. These circuits get repurposed in adult relationships, and the limbic system and stress system activate them, distorting our perception of time. This leads to the repetition compulsion, where individuals repeat traumatic circumstances over and over again, trying to rewrite the story. People have a strong desire for control and want to control the future, which makes them feel more relaxed, less vigilant, and prepared for whatever may happen. Uncertainty and control are two factors that drive people crazy until they can master and understand how little control they have and how much uncertainty there is. Tolerance of uncertainty is rare, and those who tolerate uncertainty have much less anxiety and depression. Practices such as mindful check-ins and reframing uncertainty as the beauty of the mystery of life can help individuals feel at ease with the uncertain future. Dr. Huberman suggests an exercise for dealing with uncertainty which involves leaning back, taking slow breaths, and being curious about what arises. This body stance is different from the usual go mode that many people adopt during the day. Dr. Epel explains that there are two types of approaches to stress management: forward center of mass approaches and stress mitigation techniques. Forward center of mass approaches involve adopting a mindset that shapes physiology and can activate positive anti-inflammatory pathways. Meanwhile, stress mitigation techniques involve more receptive and awareness modes. Dr. Huberman proposes that both these approaches could be valuable and suggests adopting a general framework that includes both approaches. Dr. Epel emphasizes the importance of knowing when to muscle through stress and when to let go. She compares life's challenges to waves, some of which are tidal waves that hit everyone. However, during the times when we are between waves, we have some degree of control in our direction. Dr. Epel recommends that people navigate stress skillfully by realizing when they can control things and when they can't. They should feel safe and have ease in times of low stress and gently paddle in times of high stress. Dr. Elissa Epel explains the different forms of stress: acute and chronic, good and bad, and how it is not so much the stressor, but how we respond to stress that determines its impact. The biggest propagator of internal stress is our thoughts, and Dr. Epel suggests that we need to have awareness of how our minds work and bend the tools to manage thoughts into 3 categories: rationalizing or understanding the basis of the stress, diverting our thinking away, or some other tool like mindfulness or meditation. Dr. Epel emphasizes the importance of creating a coherent narrative in order to find meaning and resolution in stressful situations. She also notes that our interpretation and response to stress is shaped by the narrative we create. Dr. Epel and Dr. Huberman also discuss breath work and its potential for inducing positive stress to promote stress resilience. Dr. Epel describes her study on the Wim Hof method, a form of breath work that has been shown to have potential health benefits, including effects on cell aging. Dr. Elissa Epel then talks about a study on mental health funded by the John W. Brick Foundation, which focuses on non-drug ways to improve mental health. The study involves comparing low-arousal relaxation methods like mindfulness and slow breathing to positive stress exercise and the Wim Hof method. Despite the different approaches, participants in both groups experienced a reduction in stress, anxiety, and depression after 3 weeks of daily practice. The Wim Hof method, in particular, led to an increase in daily positive emotion. The study also looks into various physiological pathways and mechanisms that contribute to these changes, including examining changes in mitochondrial enzymes, telomerase, and gene expression patterns. Dr. Huberman expressed his admiration for Dr. Epel's work, describing it as incredibly creative and brave. They both agreed that there is a need to explore non-drug ways of promoting healthy and resilient states, noting that there is much untapped potential in the body's natural rejuvenation and healing abilities. In this portion of the podcast transcript from the Huberman Lab, the host Dr. Andrew Huberman expresses his gratitude towards guest Dr. Elissa Epel for sharing information on stress and its impact on aging and metabolism. Dr. Epel has written books on the subject such as The Telomere Effect and The Stress Prescription, which provide practical tools to mitigate stress. One key concept discussed in the podcast is the importance of certainty and control in managing stress. Huberman acknowledges that these are 2 elements that are prominent in everyone's life, whether for better or worse. Dr. Epel and Dr. Huberman discuss the impact of stress on different age groups, with older adults typically having less stress than younger adults due to their life experiences providing wisdom and resilience. However, many individuals are unaware of the stress they carry because they are desensitized to their daily urban and modern life stressors. One strategy to relieve stress is to check in on where tension is being held in the body, and then working to metabolize and release it through various techniques. Dr. Epel outlines 3 categories of strategies to address overthinking or ruminating on stressful situations: top-down strategies of awareness and changing mindsets, body-focused techniques to metabolize stress, and changing environments to create safety signals to help alleviate stress. They also discuss the different forms of stress, including those reported consciously and those that are held unconsciously within the body, and how these can affect the body's energy usage. This portion of the Huberman Lab podcast featuring Dr. Elissa Epel focuses on stress and its effects on the body and mind. Dr. Epel explains that stress is a way for the body and mind to mobilize energy and mount a stress response to cope with things when needed. However, the problem arises when we are not good at turning off the stress response, leading to exhaustion and the inability to relax. She emphasizes the importance of catching oneself from rehearsing and reliving stress, and focusing on breathing strategies as a direct and fast path to reducing stress in the body. Dr. Epel also discusses different types of stress and how they affect the body differently. Acute stress, which lasts for minutes or hours, allows us to increase our capacity to do things during stress, and we eventually recover. Daily stressors don't necessarily release a lot of cortisol, but our nervous system is going up and down all day. Moderate stressful events may take days or months to cope with, and noticing whether we are really coping acutely with something or can restore is important. Chronically stressful situations that go on for years, such as caregiving, are situations that we can't change and lead to chronic problem-solving or radical acceptance strategies to live well with them. Dr. Epel also discusses the connection between stress and aging. Chronic stress accelerates cell aging, but there is variance between people, and some caregivers may look as biologically young or younger than controls without big stressful situations. Dr. Epel explains that no stress is not the answer, and that ideal amounts of stress are necessary for optimal aging. She explains that having no stress means not engaging in the gifts of life, which inevitably have some challenge and risk. Dr. Epel's telomere work reveals that underexposure to stress leads to more rapid aging than ideal amounts of stress. The conversation switches to the growth of the hippocampus and its significance in well-being and cognitive function. The hippocampus is a brain area involved in the formation and recall of memories. The discussion cites a study conducted by Rusty Gage at the Salk Institute in the early 2000s where terminally ill people were injected with a dye to label new neurons, and it was discovered that even they could generate new neurons, especially in the context of learning and acquiring new information. Another example is cited by Dr. Dave Almeida, who studies daily stressful events in large national populations, and a small percentage of people report no stressors. Interestingly, their level of memory and cognition was significantly lower, which may be linked to a lack of stimuli for neuroprogenerative cells in the hippocampus. The conversation then shifts to whether short bouts of stress can be beneficial, similar to how high-intensity interval training can promote aerobic fitness and stress resilience. Dr. Huberman raises the question of whether psychological stressors can also improve our stress fitness if managed well. Dr. Epel notes that engagement with moderate stressors can promote stress resilience, but it depends on how individuals view and approach the stressor. Overreacting to a stressor can lead to elevated cortisol levels and blood pressure, while perceiving a stressor as a challenge can generate a different hemodynamic response that is more cardiac output. Dr. Elissa Epel discusses the concept of a stress challenge response, which is characterized by an activated and excited response. This type of response is generally associated with a positive outlook and better problem-solving ability. In contrast, the threatened response is characterized by an over-exaggerated biological response and a slower recovery time. This type of response is often associated with feelings of failure or embarrassment. Dr. Epel notes that there are many studies that suggest that people can tilt towards the challenge response and promote stress resilience. By building resilience, one can better manage stress and mitigate its negative effects. This pivot towards a challenge response is based on mindset and the control of the script for self-comforting, self-compassion, and distancing. Dr. Huberman asks whether there are specific mental scripts that people can follow to achieve a shift towards a challenge response. Dr. Epel notes that people can control the script and prepare themselves going into stressful situations. They can also use those statements during stressful events to recover more quickly. She further explains that trauma sensitizes the emotional stress response, which is why some people may have an exaggerated emotional response. However, Dr. Epel suggests that people can develop self-compassion and awareness about their body's natural response to stress to better regulate their emotions. Dr. Epel explains that stress shields are statements, or tools that serve as a reminder to cope with stress effectively. For example, one can remind themselves of past successes, list their resources, or remind themselves that the stressor will not affect their life in the long term. Dr. Epel also suggests reframing stress as empowering and positive, to help people perform better and recover more quickly. Additionally, she discusses the relationship between stress and eating, noting that stress shuts down digestion and can make it difficult for people to feel hungry. Finally, Dr. Epel mentions the opioid system, explaining how it can be activated by factors such as sex and healthy eating habits. She explains that people tend to react differently to stress and lose weight, while others tend to overeat or binge eat. Stress-induced overeating brings about various biological changes such as high insulin levels, insulin resistance, and obesity. Epel notes that compulsive eating is a common phenotype, with roughly 50% of people with obesity exhibiting this trait. This makes it hard to eat well, especially when one is craving for comfort food high in fats, sugars, or salt. Additionally, chronic stress can lead to the accumulation of abdominal fat since it is a good source of energy during stress. Epel discusses various hypotheses about the causal link between insulin insensitivity, compulsive eating, and obesity. She explains that there is a tendency for some individuals to have a bigger reward response than hunger during stress, which becomes a coping mechanism or lifestyle that leads to obesity. This differs from other individuals who may have a dysregulated stress response but do not develop obesity. As such, Epel notes that targeting people with cravings and compulsive eating types is important in intervention studies since they require a different set of coping skills to manage stress and lose weight. Dr. Epel discusses the use of naltrexone, a drug used to block the opiate receptor in addiction, in the context of binge eating. While the drug has been used to reduce addiction, the efficacy of lowering weight gain in binge eaters remains to be seen. She notes that these drugs can dampen down on compulsive eating, but they are not commonly prescribed for obesity. Dr. Epel emphasizes the importance of addressing the toxic food environment and refined sugar as root causes of obesity. Dr. Robert Lustig, a colleague of hers at UCSF, has been talking about sugars and hidden sugars for years, and Dr. Epel believes that sugar is certainly one of the causes of the obesity epidemic. She notes that improving nutrition is the only way to solve this as a public health problem. Regarding compulsive eating, Dr. Epel suggests mindful eating and increasing bodily stress through high-intensity interval training as ways to break the cycle. She notes that people with compulsive eating tend to benefit the most from learning self-regulation skills such as slow eating, checking in with hunger, and increasing bodily awareness. To intervene in thoughts and behaviors around binge eating, Dr. Epel recommends the top-down mindful check-in method of separating emotions from hunger and labeling hunger levels from 1 to 10. She also suggests craving surfing for those who struggle with sodas or other sugary drinks. Dr. Epel notes that these interventions are low cost and accessible to everyone, regardless of healthcare access. Check out the full podcast by clicking the link in the description below. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for listening to this podcast summary episode of the Pod Slice.